Hey everybody, Shoebox Legends here. Thanks for joining me for another episode today. This is going to be a sort of contrast episode where we look at some modern shiny cards first, and then some quite old vintage hockey cards to finish it off. So there'll definitely be some contrast in today's episode. The shiny cards came in over the past few years via ComC, and then the vintage cards are from a set in the 1950s that I enjoy. Just kind of realized that a lot of the vintage cards I've shown off so far on the channel have been of the baseball variety, but I do enjoy vintage all sports, but especially hockey as well. So I wanted to show a handful of those today. But before we get to those, let's do the shine. And in this past weekend's ComC Rummage video, I showed a 2014 Topps Finest X-Fractor card, and I commented at the time that I am working on building the 2014 Finest set in X-Fractor format. You can see these just catch the light amazingly. I mentioned in the video this weekend that this is my favorite Topps Finest set, going all the way back to like the early to mid 90s when the brand debuted. I think Topps just knocked it out of the park, and have a small handful of these that I found in my ComC to be posted box. So I decided to pull them all out so I could get these into my binder and get a kind of a final count on where I am with this set. There are only 100 cards in the set, and I'm getting really, really close. Of the ones I pulled today, this is the most boring one, I would say. Rougned Odor rookie card. It is a rookie. You can see the RC logo is kind of snuck in on the left border there. It sort of gets lost in the X-Fractoriness, but pretty neat card there. The rest of these, I would say, are considered, modern star players. So we have Anthony Rizzo here with the Cubs. Yadier Molina, future Hall of Fame catcher, in my opinion, and pulled a nice shiny card of his, or a Diamond Princess did for me, out of 2022 Topps. So pretty cool to have this 2014 X-Fractor to go with it. He seems to have a pretty hardcore following of collectors, so his cards, when you're working on a set pursuit, tend to cost a couple bucks for parallels like this. So that's why he was one of the final cards that I was able to track down. Another guy who's destined for Cooperstown, in my opinion, Mr. Joey Votto, on-base percentage master. And I like the photograph here. Looks like he just slashed one to the opposite field and is sort of admiring his work before taking off for first base. Neat card there. Here's a very early, not a rookie, but an early career Josh Donaldson, the slugger who's bounced around for a few different teams. I don't even recall where he's at now. I think he maybe was dealt to the Yankees this offseason, but I could be wrong about that. But this is an early career Oakland Athletics card, and the A's look particularly nice on this, largely green format. Got a underrated slugger here, Edwin Encarnacion. Be cool if he was doing like his chicken wing celebration, but nice photograph there of Edwin rounding the bases for Toronto. Just a couple more of these to go. Longtime stud in the Cardinals starting rotation, Mr. Adam Wainwright. Cool one there. And then we close out with the recently retired Buster Posey, who gave up his catching duties in San Francisco after many years and called it a career. So nice looking card there. These are just beautiful. I'll spare the speech about them, other than to say they just look fantastic. The binder that has these in it, it just, when you're thumbing through it, you practically need to wear sunglasses to thumb through it. So just really, really cool shiny cards if you're into that sort of thing. And speaking of which, the next two that I have on the shiny front are even more so, require some sunglasses when you're looking them over. And two, I guess, star players. One's sort of fallen from grace a little bit. But these are additions to my 2011 Topps Chrome Atomic Refractor set pursuit. Getting very, very close on this. I haven't talked about this in months. In the early days of the channel, I was desperately chasing an Andrew McCutchen, which is a card that took me years to track down. Finally got one of those. But today, as I kind of near the sunset on this set pursuit, I have a pair of New York Yankees, which are always traditionally tough when you're working on a set. Everybody, just ton of Yankee collectors. But I've got Robbie Cano first, who's the guy that I mentioned who sort of fell from grace. I think had a positive PED test. but was a very, very effective second baseman for quite a long time in New York. So happy to have that one. I'm definitely down below 10 cards to go now in this 220 card Atomic set from 2011, so really getting exciting here. And the other one that I have to show today is a huge card. I bought this probably 4 or 5 years ago on ComC, and I think I got it for $20, which was, maybe the most I'd paid for any card for my set at the time, but I knew this is someone who is widely collected. It is the double play counterpart in the middle infield for Robbie Cano in 2011, Mr. Derek Jeter. Just a really beautiful late career Jeter card. Feel very, very privileged to be one of the 225 people who own a copy of this card, and I guess it may be less than 225 collectors if anybody has, doubles or more than one, but really happy to bring that one home for the collection. That felt like a huge win. Probably the biggest remaining name that I needed to sort into my set here, and had almost kind of half forgotten that I had picked that up, and it was sitting in a to be rifled through ComC pickup box. So pretty significant chunk out of the 2011 Atomic set there with those two individuals. And then one more shiny card before we move on. Topps Chrome Sapphire is a brand that I love. I've shown, Sapphire cards many times on the channel, and in fact showed one again in just this past weekend's ComC Rummage video. This is another 2019, which looks just like an Atomic of my guy, Xander Bogaerts. Love this card. I do have a run of every Bogaerts Sapphire card since the brand's inception in 2016. And this 2019 is obviously essential for that run. And aside from that, I really enjoyed the horizontal 2019 card of Xander throwing from one knee. I think it's an interestingly cropped photo, clearly taken at Fenway Park. That is not the green monster in the background. It's like the left field wall that connects to the green monster. So I can tell this was taken from, the first baseline or, the dugout, first base dugout, somewhere thereabouts. But a pretty cool picture. So I've been trying to kind of accumulate as many different versions of this card as I can. So this kind of holds two purposes in the collection. Helps me out with that Sapphire Bogaerts run, and helps me out with my kind of ever-growing side collection of his 2019 Topps issue and all its different variants. So those are the shiny cards that I pulled for today. And then, as promised, just going to look at a handful of vintage hockey cards here. These are all from the same release, and that is 1954-55 Parkhurst hockey. So these are obviously pretty early hockey cards. Hockey cards go back, believe it or not, as far back as baseball cards, all the way to the early 1900s, but then they were very sparsely produced from that point in time all the way up to the 50s. And it was in the early 50s where the brand Parkhurst really started producing them on a regular, recurring basis. And this is one of the earlier Parkhurst sets from 1954. And from the Boston Bruins, card number 56, Warren Godfrey. So these are kind of neat. They remind me, very much of like vintage Bowman baseball, in that they are oversized and they contain a painting of the player. So the lighting's not great in here this morning. It's a little bit dark outside today, but neat card. You definitely get an appreciation for the design, plain white border, really nice painting of the player. You get a facsimile autograph, and then in the upper right corner, that is actually the card number, not the player's jersey number. So a little bit unique. I think this might have been the only year that this happened in Parkhurst hockey, or one of them anyway, where the card number is actually on the front of the card. The backs are pretty well done as well. Obviously, this was the 1950s. They didn't have the technology to be, easily producing paintings or photos on the back, but you do get a nice write-up that's easy on the eyes. You get the important stats up top from the previous season, a little bit of a summary or rundown of where the player is at in their career. And then you get the information in both English and French on these Parkhurst cards. Obviously, these were big up in Canada. They were printed in Canada, as you can see. And so Parkhurst wanted to appeal to both English-speaking and French-speaking collectors. So there's Warren Godfrey. Don't know too much about him as a player. Obviously, these predate my birth by like 3 decades or more. So I don't, didn't really get to see any of these guys play, but I do know the next subject. This is one that I'm really proud to own. Longtime captain of the Bruins, Mr. Milt Schmidt. And he played on the Kraut line with Boston throughout the 50s. Is a Hall of Famer, and then went on to have a very esteemed career, both in the front office and behind the bench for the Bruins. Was very, very instrumental in orchestrating the trade that brought Phil Esposito to Boston later in the 60s, and resulted, most people believe, in their early 1970s Stanley Cups. And so really cool card there. Love the painting. And Milt is one of the all-time greatest Boston Bruins that you just don't hear as much about. I think hardcore hockey fans are familiar with Milt Schmidt, but I think casual modern-day fans may not really know who he is or have a lot of familiarity with him. So really happy to have this one. It was not an expensive ad when I got it back in the day. I don't know what his cards, command now that he's passed away and being a Hall of Famer, but pretty neat one there. Next up, I have also from the Bruins. And at the time when I was collecting these, I was sort of a quasi-Bruins team collector. So that's why the first 3 of these all feature, Boston Bruins. I wouldn't really consider myself a Bruins collector these days, but love these cards nonetheless. Here is Eddie Sanford. And this one looks a little bit different. Obviously, it's very, very noticeable. On the All-Star cards in this release, the background was washed out with white and just a simple star was placed behind the player. So kind of a neat effect to denote the All-Stars in the set and separate them from the non-All-Star players. Pretty cool there. And I find these are also cool because the facsimile auto tends to be a lot more visible. On the non-All-Star cards, the backgrounds and the paintings tend to be a little bit dark. And so it's a little bit difficult, I guess, to make out the facsimile autograph. But on the All-Star cards, the auto really pops and they just look really, really nice. So pretty cool job there by Parkhurst. The backs look the same on the All-Star cards. Nothing different about the back, just the whitewashed front with the star placed in the background. And then the last 2 that I have from the set and for today's video in general are like almost like in-action cards you can think of, like Topps treated us to in the 70s in the baseball realm, 70s and 80s. But the last few cards on the checklist, and this was a pretty small set. I think it was 100 cards deep. And I want to say the last 10 cards feature these in-action cards. And here is the first. This is called, really neat, this is called Netminders Nightmare. And obviously because, all these players are converging on the crease and just tons of sharp metal blades and very heavy bodies falling on the goaltender here for Toronto. Other than that, the design's largely the same. There's no facsimile auto because these aren't cards of a specific player. They're really moment in time type cards, but you do still get the card number in the upper right. And then on the back, you get a nice summary here of what's going on the front. So this is Toronto netminder Lumley, and taking the full brunt of 4 hockey players crashing in on top of him and his net in a wild scramble of sticks, legs, and flashing blades. So love the description there. Love the Netminders Nightmare headline with an exclamation point. Just pretty funny and creative card. Love the job that Parkhurst did with these. At some point in my collecting lifetime, I feel like I say this all the time, it would definitely be fun and an honor to try to complete the 54-55 Parkhurst set. Obviously, there are some really big cards in there, Gordie Howe and Rocket Richard and players like that. But as it stands right now, I've just sort of grabbed these on the cheap over the years as I've been able to find them. But this last one is really neat. This is another one of these in-action cards. What's cool about this one, the Toronto netminder that's featured here is Jacques Plante. So really, really neat. Those of you that are hockey fans or vintage hockey fans or fans of the history of the sport will know that he is one of the best netminders in the history of the league. His 50s cards are wildly expensive. And so this is kind of a neat way to get sort of a poor man's Plante card without, breaking the bank. I paid less than $20. I want to say it was about $10 or $12 for this card. Now that was, probably 10 years ago, to be fair. So I'm sure they command a little bit more than that now, but compared to his base card from the set or his other base cards from the era. This is a bargain, and it's kind of a fun way to get a card of a bona fide Hall of Famer without spending a lot of coins. So that is the final one that I have to show here today. Headline on that one is Placid Plant Foils Tireless Teeter. So again, pretty good verbiage there from the folks at Parkhurst. I'll leave this here for a second in case anybody wants to pause it and read the write-up, but just really creative job there by the folks at Parkhurst. So that is a wrap for today. Figured these would kind of make an interesting juxtaposition, extremely shiny 21st century baseball cards next to some 1950s vintage hockey. So I hope you saw something that interested you on one side of the coin or the other. And I certainly appreciate you spending a few minutes to stop by and check out the cards. And I'll be back in the very near future with some more sports card content. Until then, take care.